we're in the gym like 10 hours a day. And that's kind of like a normal training day. And I remember when I was preparing for world championships, we had these crazy long days where they just like didn't seem like they would end. And it's very taxing mentally and just physically.
Why does it require that much training? Like 60 hours a week, like dang.
I think because it is such a diverse sport in terms of what you need. You need the apparatus coordination, and that takes so much precision. It also takes a lot of smart repetition to be able to get your throws that precise, and also just to get the foundation of apparatus work. And then there's 4 apparatus. There you have to master all 4 of them to be a competitive rhythmic gymnast. And then there's your body. You have to, from a young age, you're training everything from strength to flexibility. And then there's an element of like artistry. And then you have your routines. And you put that all together and it's 90 seconds. But it's 90 seconds that are jam-packed from beginning to end. And every single little detail, every single step matters.
So if we can, let's run through some of the different events. There's 4 events, correctly?
Yes.
Let's watch this a little bit. Please.
I can go through and tell you what each thing is. So this is a turn. This is part of a body difficulty. And then this will be a jump, which is another body difficulty. Each one is worth a different amount of points. And those are kind of connector steps into another turn. And in these set of rules, you had to have dancing steps, which actually are still a thing in the last set of rules that I did. But the dancing step, we don't have to go into the nitty gritty of it. So a dancing step has to fulfill certain criteria, a balance. And now this is a risk. So there would be a high toss with a number of different rotations underneath into a catch.
That's incredible to me. I don't even understand how you do that. Like throw that up with your foot. How high do you throw that up in the air? Like how high is that in the air?
I couldn't give you an exact measure, but we often have a hard time finding training facilities because the ceilings are too low. So that is a struggle for athletes in the US. A lot of them do not have stable training facilities with proper ceiling and enough space because the carpet is massive and the ceilings have to be very tall. And it is better if you're able to throw higher.
That was high enough that it was in the air for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So, like, how long does it take before, how many times do you practice something like that before you can do it?
Oh, so many times. Yeah, a repetition, like I said, is a big part of our sport. Smart repetition is a really big part of our sport because if you over repeat, you can get injured very easily. And I learned that the hard way.
Okay, so after the hoop, there is
the... Then you have the ball. So the ball is not a bowling ball. That is something I get asked way more than I like to admit.
Okay, so let's watch this.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the sport is you can be very creative. And creativity is really fun to watch. That specific thing I can remember how many times I trained that. And honestly, there are people who do that from a huge, large toss now, which I didn't need with these rules. But people do that catch with many rotations under the toss too, which is very impressive. I will be completely honest, I do not remember if this routine was good or not.
I mean, it's really impressive to me.
Thank you. So that is what's called an apparatus difficulty with a roll.
Are there required things like you have to do this so many times, you have to do that so many times?
You have to have, in this set of rules, 20 apparatus difficulties. I'm like watching this and I see so many mistakes.
But to me, like watching it, like what are you noticing that like, oh, that was a mistake, that was a mistake? Because to me, this all looks like, okay, great.
Yeah, so I'm very good at this. I'm very picky. So that would be an execution deduction for shape and for a large step underneath. I'm like exposing myself. There was a hop. See, like it was a small, minuscule hop, but the rest of that element could be not counted. So there's just like execution deductions on that.
But not the kind of thing that any casual person would notice.
No, this would all be things that a viewer who knew the rhythmic rules would really be able to tell, I think. even watching this routine, I'm getting stressed. Like,
But did you catch that with your legs? You did.
yeah.
That's crazy. So when you do that, right? Like when you make one of the throws, are you throwing it to a specific spot? Like, is it just perfectly timed, or are you making adjustments all over the place to make that happen?
I think when you do a toss, how I approach it is I try to remember the sensation of when I'm throwing it to the correct spot, coupled with kind of my baseline technique, making sure my arms are, for example, for that toss, my arms are extended, that I'm square, like my shoulders are square with my hips, because common mistakes, like if you're off by a degree or two, the toss will not go the direction you want. It's also important that the toss is forward of you, because you can get a deduction for trajectory if it's not precise in front of you. You can also get deduction for you can also not get credit for the big toss if you don't fulfill your rotations underneath. So these are all very specific things. And because of that, yes, in long story short, I do direct my throws to a very specific area of the carpet.
So you're trying to throw it up to have it land on this spot, as opposed to like, I'm going to throw it up and then I'm going to do what I'm going to do and adjust to where the ball is.
I think you have to be flexible. So what makes a lot of athletes in the sport stand out is their ability to adjust. So you cannot be perfect. Tosses will go far or they'll be too short. And you'll see very incredible saves from great gymnasts because they're able to adapt quickly underneath the throw. They're able to adjust their bodies. That's how you can tell someone is, one, a great competitor, and two, very seasoned, is because they're able to adapt their body to how far the toss is. Yeah, a lot of elements can affect it. With the ribbon, when the AC is on, can go every which direction. We actually, we do consistency, I guess, drills, consistency markings for ourselves during training. Like I will practice each risk, each throw multiple times, every practice of every single apparatus, because you do need them to be that precise.
Now, okay, when we talk about these clubs, like the first thing that I'm thinking about is like bowling pins.
Yep.
How
Yep. They
how
do look a little like bowling pins.
they do look like bowling pins, but how big are they? Like how big, how heavy in real life?
It's funny because I'm watching these videos and I'm just like cringing a little.
But I feel like
This was my
everybody.
second year back from competing, and there were a lot of things I had to figure out, like what worked for me and what didn't. So some of these elements in my routine I don't have anymore because they just didn't work for me.
So, for example, like okay, the person who wins the world championship or wins the gold medal in this competition, like just from my perspective, like what are they doing that you would not be doing?
They, at least from my experience back in the day, when we would train with these girls, and this sport would be like their entire life. And it's very different in some of these countries where they are able to make training their priority, whereas I wasn't able to do that. I had to go to school. Athletes in the US don't get paid enough to live off of,
Yeah.
just speaking. So, yeah, I have a day job. I train at nights. And I think that's kind of like the biggest thing.
All right, last one, the ribbons. This is the one that I notice the most. That's the one I feel like I usually see.
This is the most identifiable out of all of them. That's why whenever I explain rhythmic gymnastics, usually the first thing I say will be it's with the ribbon.
So what's the goal? Like you're trying to just constantly keep it moving the whole time?
Yes. So part of the technique in ribbon is keeping it moving and making sure your patterns are precise. So if you're making these little loops called spirals, they really are looking for how clean and how tight and how many spirals are happening. And if you're making a snake, which looks like the zigzag, it's the same thing. So they're evaluating kind of based off of how your ribbon is moving as well.
Do you have to have a different outfit for every single one? Like is it hard to find an outfit that matches the ribbon?
So we get these custom made. Most people, I think, at an elite high level will go to a designer who is designing specifically rhythmic leotards.